The government was intended to be of the white man, by the white man, and for the white man.
They were called the Hate Group, terrorists with a vile and vicious goal, which was the annihilation of the black race. Racism and superiority being their prime motivation, they did the unimaginable to humanity, all in the name of supremacy and control. This is the naked truth about the Ku Klux Klan. It was in Pulaski, Tennessee in 1865 that the first Ku Klux Klan chapter was established. The chapter started out as a social club that included numerous former Confederate soldiers. According to history, the initial two words of the organization's name, Ku Klux, were believed to come from the Greek word kaikios, which means circle. After that, the word Klan was added. Local Klan groups gathered in the summer of 1867 for a general organizing conference. They created what they referred to as an invisible empire of the South. Nathan Bedford Forrest, a prominent Confederate officer, was chosen to be the first leader or Grand Wizard of the Klan. He presided over a so-called hierarchy of Grand Dragons, Grand Titans, and Grand Cyclopes. However, just knowing about the KKK is nothing compared to knowing the motives behind the atrocities and malevolent evil they committed against humanity. So, what were the motives of the KKK? As of 1867, black candidates started winning elections into southern state governments and even to the U.S. Congress. Their engagement in public life in the South became one of the Reconstruction's most radical elements. In an effort to undo the effects of radical Reconstruction and reinstate white supremacy in the South, this heartless and power-drunk cult devoted itself to a clandestine campaign of violence against Republican leaders and supporters, both blacks and whites. As if that wasn't bad enough, during Reconstruction, at least 10% of the black legislators elected during the 1867 to 1868 constitutional conventions suffered unspeakable, tremendous violence. About 7 of them were brutally murdered in cold blood. In addition, black institutions like schools and churches were symbols of black autonomy and were the major targets of Klan attacks. They also targeted white Republicans who were denied as carpetbaggers and scalawags. Hearing about their deeds in detail may sound like a science fiction horror movie, but they really did happen. So let me take you deeper into the sadistic and grimy deeds of the KKK. Let's say it exactly as it is. Choosing the worst atrocities perpetrated by the KKK would be a really daunting task. Absolutely everything they engage in represents the epitome of the worst and most repulsive acts of their kind. According to history, even the KKK's Grand Wizard, Nathan Bedford Forrest himself, attempted to put an end to the entire bloodthirsty organization. And that's simply because it was becoming a violent and gruesome group. So, here are some of their awful attacks. A mob of about 50 armed men, led by a guy named William Chappell, ambushed the Freedom Riders. Now, the Freedom Riders were campaigners against bus segregation and were traveling from South Carolina to New Orleans when they got ambushed by the KKK. The irreparable harm had already been done before the cops bothered to arrive, yet the victims were cruelly abandoned by the cops after being escorted out of town. As expected, the mob returned and set their bus on fire. When their devious attempts to lock the passengers inside the blazing bus failed, they decided to beat those who managed to escape. Later on, the federal government intervened and promised their protection, but state and local law enforcement totally failed in their duties. They assured these hate-filled terrorists that they could carry on with their activities without fear of interference from the police. Now, if you think now is horrible, you haven't heard anything yet. Wait till you hear what they did to kids. Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, and Carol Robertson were 14 years of age, and Denise McNair was 11 when they died in a bombing that the KKK of Birmingham, Alabama had organized. According to NPR, the 4 girls were at 16th Street Baptist Church on September 15th in 1963. They happened to be not far from the stairs where the KKK had maliciously planted the bomb. The explosion happened when these beautiful souls were waiting for church service to begin. According to historians at Ferris State University, the church had been targeted and singled out because of its members' participation in the civil rights movement. Not only were no city authorities present at the girl's funeral service, which drew thousands of mourners, but also 23 black people were indiscriminately detained after the explosion for a variety of crimes. One young man who wasn't charged with any crime was even shot dead in cold blood by a cop. The 4 KKK members responsible for this distasteful act weren't charged for 45 years, and one had even died before those charges were eventually brought. It was at this point that lynching black people became more like a sport activity to the KKK. A good example is the story of Michael Donalds, which does not have a happy ending, but it's quite satisfactory because of his mother's efforts. The KKK had set fire to a cross in front of the courthouse in Mobile County, Alabama, on the evening of March 21, 1981. The mob decided that the evening wouldn't be complete without an authentic murder and began hunting for their victim. They found Michael Donald, a local African-American youngster who was 19 years old. Michael was described by ABC News as being a gentle, quiet, and responsible guy who frequently looked after the neighborhood children. He was on his way to the neighborhood corner store when he was suddenly kidnapped by the men he had stopped to give directions. This young boy was hopelessly tortured and his body was found hanged the next morning. After an open casket funeral, which his mother insisted on, they buried Donald on the 28th. She wanted everyone to be aware of what transpired. The undertaker didn't want me to see where they'd made a footprint on his face with their boots, she said. Sadly, the convictions of the culprits, Henry Hayes and James Knowles, didn't come until 1984, with only Hayes receiving the death penalty. Donald's mother wasn't pleased, and she went on and filed a legal case against the local KKK chapter. She won a $7 million judgment and ended up bankrupting the United Klans of America. In 1997, Hayes died by execution. Do you think these victims ever really got justice? Although the Ku Klux Klan members ranged from modest farmers and workers to landowners, lawyers, businessmen, physicians, and clergy, Democratic leaders would subsequently blame the organization's brutality on poorer Southern white people. Local law enforcement officers either belonged to the Klan or chose not to take action against it in the areas where the majority of Klan activity occurred. Even those who apprehended alleged Klansmen found it challenging to locate witnesses who would testify against them. And the leading Southern whites who could have spoken out against the group's acts? Well, instead, they chose to remain silent and tactfully endorse them. So, there we've got it. And here's the thing, these were just some of the stories of how the Ku Klux Klan committed crimes against black people and how they operated in secret. But did you know that the Ku Klux Klan still exists? Today, the Anti-Defamation League pegged the number of Klan members in 2016 as roughly 3,000, while the Southern Poverty Law Center put it at closer to 6,000. Hence, it would seem that their power and control have greatly weakened in our present day. So, when do you think the Klan will disappear for good? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and please remember to subscribe to our channel so that you can help us reach a larger audience. And, as always, thank you very much for choosing to spend your time with us today. We'll see you in our next video.